So I'm here today with my roommate, Leah. She was raised by deaf parents, which is very different from me, as both of my parents are not deaf, and so I had a very different upbringing, very different experience with that. Just wanting to talk to her a little bit more about her experience and how it was. So thanks for joining me.
No problem.
So if you can tell me just a little bit more about your childhood experience growing up with deaf parents, how it affected you.
So I'm a CODA, which means I'm a child of deaf adults. I have a hearing brother, and then both of my parents are deaf, and they're the only deaf people in the rest of their family, so everyone else is hearing. It honestly, I don't really know, I don't know how to compare it to, growing up with hearing parents, so I don't really, it's hard to explain what growing up was like because it just feels normal to me. But things that were definitely a little different were growing up I would have to interpret for my parents sometimes, when we go to the grocery store or out at restaurants. I grew up going to summer camp for kids with deaf parents, and so I was actively involved in the deaf community and learning about deaf culture and what being deaf means and what being a CODA means. But honestly, other than that, I had a pretty normal childhood. I lived in the suburbs, went to public school, pretty much the generic American childhood.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I also grew up in the suburbs and went to public school and stuff, but yet our upbringing is quite different. Do you think interpreting at grocery stores and stuff, it was challenging?
I mean, for me individually, sometimes it would be just because my grandparents were kind of it's hard to explain, but they basically I did not have the best ASL was my first language, but as I got a little older, I started to lose some of it just because I went to public school and I was always around. I was speaking more than I was signing, and so just being able to interpret correctly as a 10-year-old is sometimes difficult. But also my parents have been alive for way longer than me, and they obviously can figure things out on their own, but it's just kind of convenient when I'm around.
Yeah, and that gets to my next point with sign language. How did you learn and at what age?
I honestly, I don't remember when I learned, so I just always assume because I grew up before my brother was born, it was just me and my parents, and we we lived in a townhouse, and we didn't really the only people that I was around were deaf people, and so I guess I learned ASL in the same way that you would learn English, just from picking it up.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think I remember actually in first grade, maybe second grade, but early elementary school, we learned the alphabet and sign language, and that was it. And I don't remember any of it now, but it's kind of crazy that we're not taught more about it.
And it's when I go to summer camp for I'm there for 6 weeks, and I'm around people, and we're always signing, and so when I over the summer I get super I get super fluent, and then when I come home I'm signing all the time with my parents, and then I come to school and I'm with a bunch of hearing people, and then it's you
lose it.
I lose all of it, and I have to keep signing more to remember everything.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I was gonna bring up your camp experience because I know it's kind of unique. If you want to just tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I went to a place called CODA Camp at Camp Mark 7. It is the best place ever. I grew up going there from 9 to 16, and then I am a counselor now. And it basically, it's just a regular summer camp, but then also everyone there has deaf parents, and we also we have regular camp activities, but then we also have stuff, we have this thing called CODA Talks, where we just sit and talk about we will ask campers questions about their CODA. We focus a lot on our CODA identity and what that means, and so we spend a lot of time at camp really exploring our place in the world, and just kind of navigating that, and being able to be in a community where everyone is the same in a way. It's just very comforting, because a lot of we always say CODAs are we have the best of both worlds. We're one foot in the hearing world and one foot in the deaf world.
Yeah.
And it's very alienating sometimes, because it's a very obviously a very unique experience.
Yeah.
And so when you go to a camp for 2 weeks or the whole summer with a bunch of people who are just in the same situation as you, it's comforting, and it provides a lot of insight on your life and just life in general.
Yeah. What kinds of activities did you guys do?
You know, like we were on a lake, so we had like waterfront, and we did like canoe trips, and we would go hiking. We had like arts and crafts, like sports stuff, like evening activities, and then for like CODA and like deaf stuff, we had ASL night, where we would just teach the campers about like deaf culture, like different aspects of deaf culture. So like one year, one of our counselors was from Ireland, and so
cool.
for ASL night that year, he taught everyone like the Irish sign language alphabet, and then like just
it's different?
Yeah, there's like different, like there's like different sign language. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then we we have like CODA talks, and a big thing that we do is a lot of people, we have like a talent show at the end of the session, and so a lot of kids will like to sign songs.
Oh, that's cool.
That's like a big thing that like CODA is like doing, and like deaf, it's like a big thing in the deaf community to like sign songs, because I don't know, it's like super cool.
Yeah, no, it is cool. It's very unique, really great skill that a lot of people can't do. Do you think or do you miss going to camp, like as an actual camper?
Yeah, but also now that I'm like a counselor, it's so much more fun because it's like we're in charge and we get to like stay up all night and do like fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I love like being a camper, like going to camp is the one thing every year that I look forward to. And like it was only 2 weeks, and so the whole year I'd be waiting like for this 2 weeks of the summer to be at camp, and then it would end, and then I'd have to wait a whole nother year.
And is it by where you're from?
It's actually like 2 hours from here. It's in Old
Okay.
Forge, which is up in the Adirondacks.
Okay, cool. And she's from Virginia, just for reference, so it's a little bit different. Do you ever like find it challenging to communicate with your parents?
No, I mean, like, not for me personally, just because I am like pretty fluent in ASL, but I know my brother who just would like has just isn't as fluent in ASL just because he like goes to public school, and our like again like they're just like growing up, our situation was kind of weird where we just like weren't really allowed to sign with our parents, because it's like a long story, but back in the day, like in the 60s, when like kids would be born deaf, doctors would tell their parents, like, don't teach your kid sign language, you should take them to public school, like they need to be as like oral as possible to help them adapt. And so what that did is like my parents, like if you would talk to my parents, they sound like you can like understand them pretty clearly, but then there are some, just because they went to public school, like my mom didn't even learn sign language until she went to college, and so like
that's crazy.
She like both of my parents were like very oral, which is like not the case for every deaf person. And so with me and my brother growing up, we like our grandparents were kind of like very stuck in their ways, and so they just kind of were very like shitty about it. Sorry to swear.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, we had some struggles growing up, but we figured it out.
That's good. And I think like going back to the whole education of it too, I think it's kind of interesting that we're not taught that much about it. Like as someone who didn't grow up around deaf people, do you think, like, what are your thoughts about that, and like how much we should be educated on it?
I mean, they're like the deaf community is like small. I mean, they're like most people will not meet or talk to a deaf person in their life. But I do think like sign language as a language is just very convenient. It's very helpful. Yeah. Because there are a lot of times where like not speak, like you can't talk, or
and it's pretty easy to understand.
Right.
Too.
It's like pretty. I don't want to say universal because there are different like sign languages, but
it's not like Spanish. Yeah. Where like you have to really know it.
But like just the issue is that like when you're learning, you should really be learning sign language from a deaf person, because there's so, like with having a language, like with a language there's a culture behind it, and so like you know when you're in like high school and you take like a French class by like a very clearly American person, like you're missing out on so much stuff to the language that like you wouldn't miss if you were being taught by like a native speaker.
That's really interesting. Are there a lot of like, actually I know my high school, we had an ASL class and the guy was deaf, but he communicated really well speaking. So I know like a lot of people didn't find that class to be too hard because it was so like you kind of could like BS it. Yeah. I don't know. Do you think it should be taught more in schools?
If it's taught right, yeah. If it's taught by a deaf person, then yeah, I think it is a very valuable thing to know.
Yeah, I think it's surprising to me that it's not more universal, not more common. I think a lot of schools don't even, like, teach it, like, or offer it as a language.
I just think it's because most people see being deaf as, like, just, like, a disability that someone has, whereas in reality, like, yeah, it's a disability, but it really isn't. Like, my parents can do, like, they're not limited by pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And it's, like, less, it's, like, it's a culture. Like, there's a whole culture behind it.
Yeah.
And I don't think people really
It's, like, weird that we're not taught that.
Yeah.
Even, like, not even just, like, learning sign language, but learning what is behind it is, it's so interesting, too. It's so different. I don't know. Do you ever find it, like, frustrating that people don't know a lot about it?
All the time. And, like, especially, like, like, if you go on TikTok, there will be people making, like, deaf jokes, like, really insensitive stuff. And it's not even because they're deliberately doing it. They just don't know. Like, they just don't know. And it's hard to see people, like, other people talk about, like, issues in the deaf community that, like, obviously I'm not deaf, so I have, like, a bit of separation from those. And so I'm not, like, it's not my place either, but, like, seeing people who know nothing about the deaf community talk about those things just, like, is kind of weird.
It's really ignorant. I mean,
because there's no one, like, there are only, like, very few, like, deaf people, like, prominent deaf people. There's, like, Niall DeMarco and, like, Marley Matlin, but there's no, like, that's just it. There's, like, no one else, and it sucks. I wish there were more, like, prominent deaf people in, like, our society.
I know. I think, like, in pop culture especially, everyone's so in tune to TikTok and, like, social media and artists and all this stuff, and I feel like it's never talked about, or never, like, talked about in an educational way, I guess, or, like, in a celebratory way. It's always just, like, this is a disability, and people don't know anything about it.
The thing that frustrates me the most is when I see videos of, like, deaf babies hearing for, like, they get, like, cochlear implants or hearing aids, and, like, they record them, like, hearing for the first time. That's called, it's called, like, inspiration porn or something, and there's, like, a lot of other things that, like, fall into that category, but those videos are, like, just celebrating, like, deaf people being able to hear, or, like, getting, like, hearing aids or cochlear implants. It's just, like, so, like, it's just, I don't know, like, it's so frustrating because, like, deaf people don't need to hear. It's not, like, being deaf isn't something that you need to fix.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many much better videos of deaf babies learning to sign for the first time, or, like, like actual things to be proud of than, like, being fixed, which is, like...
Yeah, no, that's such an awful... it should not be how it is. I don't know, it's just crazy that there's so much... such a lack of awareness around it.
I'm so proud to be a CODA, and I know my parents are so proud to be deaf, and I just am so, like, I feel like the luckiest person ever to, like, be who I am. And it's just crazy that people think that being deaf is something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Or something that, like, it's something that shouldn't happen.
I mean, it's good that you have such a positive lookout on it.
I know that a lot of people don't have the same experience I did, but I just, like, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think now that you're in college, how do you think it affects you? Do you find it, like, or do you find different ways to communicate with your parents?
I mean, like, I FaceTime them a lot. Like, we usually just text. But just, like, it's so, like, growing up as a CODA, like, has so, like, affected my, like, sense of, like, community so much, just because I grew up, like, with the same, like, my parents' friends, their kids were my friends, and, like, we just, like, have this big circle. And then, like, coming to college was so strange because there were, like, last year I knew one other CODA that I went to camp with that went here, and now it's just, like, me, and it's so weird.
Yeah.
Because I'm always, like, longing for, like, being with deaf people and being with CODAs, and it's just such a rare thing that happens these days.
Were your parents' friends also deaf?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, my parents' friends now, they have known since, like, college and earlier.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So they say, like, pretty tight-knit.
Yeah. And it's just, like, exciting because, like, my parents were all friends, and their kids, like, I'm friends with them now, and then, like, when we have kids, like, they're all gonna be friends. It's just, like, it's a little family.
It's, like, a very different sense of community.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I think this was really informative, really great. I think there's a lot of awareness that needs to be made around this, and it needs to be more normalized, and I don't know how that'll happen in the future, but I think this was a really great start, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I love talking about my parents and stuff. It's very fun.